The slap landed before I even saw it coming. My glasses flew off, hitting the ballroom floor and shattering into 1,000 pieces. 130 guests froze, their gasps swallowed by a heavy silence. My cheek throbbed, but the ache in my chest was far worse. Olivia, my daughter-in-law, had just slapped me on her own wedding day. All because I refused to hand her the keys to my apartment. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she screamed, her voice echoing through the grand hall. "A woman your age doesn't need that much space." The crowd didn't breathe. I bent down, trembling, to collect the shards of my broken glasses and felt the weight of 100 judgmental eyes on me. Some guests looked away. Others whispered. But no one, not even one, dared to stand up for me, the humiliated mother-in-law, abandoned in front of everyone. My son, Ethan, stood still, eyes glued to the floor, as if I didn't exist. "You're not welcome here anymore," Olivia sneered, smoothing her flawless gown. "Ethan and I need privacy to start our life together. Your apartment will be perfect for us until we find something better." Her words cut deeper than the slap. I had endured her condescending remarks for months about my simple clothes, my aging car, my modest life. But this was beyond cruelty. Slowly, I stood up, feeling every stare like a dagger piercing my back. Tears slid down my face, but something inside me hardened forever. That slap wasn't just humiliation, it was a spark. For years, I had lived quietly, never revealing what I truly carried inside. Even my son didn't know my secrets. As I walked toward the exit, my mind flooded with memories. I remembered the first time Olivia visited my apartment 2 years ago. Her smile had faltered the moment she saw my modest home. "Seriously, this is where Ethan's mom lives?" she had whispered, loud enough for me to hear. From that day, every visit became silent torture. "Aura, you should move to a smaller place," she'd said at dinner months ago, wearing that fake, sugary smile. "At your age, you can't handle such a big apartment. Besides, Ethan and I will need more space soon. We're planning to have kids." My son just nodded, like a puppet dangling from her strings. It started with insults about my clothes. "Don't you own anything modern?" Then my car. "That thing is ancient. You'll crash one day." Then my part-time job. "Why are you still working? You should be resting." Each comment, each smirk, each poisoned word had been slicing away at my dignity, until today, when the final blow came, not to destroy me, but to wake me. My name is Aurora Hughes. I am 68 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've chosen discretion over display. 3 days a week I work quietly at a small flower shop. I drive a 10-year-old sedan. My clothes come from discount stores. To the outside world, especially to Olivia, I am nothing but a modest widow scraping by on a fixed income. That's the image I have carefully built for decades. What no one in that ballroom of whispered pity truly knows is that my life was nothing like this before my husband died. Robert, my husband, wasn't the dull office worker everyone believed. We made a conscious decision to live simply, to protect our true wealth, and to shield our family's privacy in ways that now seem almost prophetic. As I walked out of the ballroom, their voices clung to me like a toxic fog. "Poor thing, she looks so fragile," I heard Olivia's aunt murmur. "The bride is right. She can't take care of herself anymore," Ethan's cousin added. "She should be in a retirement home." Someone else chimed in, with syrupy false compassion. Each remark was acid on open wounds. The ballroom's cool air pressed against the furnace inside my chest. My hands trembled as I reached into my worn black purse, a purse I had carried for 5 years not from necessity, but from choice, because I valued practicality over appearances, something my new daughter-in-law would never grasp. I dialed a number I had memorized long ago, one I hadn't dared to use in over a year. "Carlos, it's Aurora. I need you at the Royal Oaks Ballroom right now. Bring the documents. All of them. It's time they learn the truth." My voice shook, but in it lived a steel I hadn't felt in years. "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes?" Carlos asked, his tone professional, but tinged with concern. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I turned to glance into the ballroom one last time. Olivia was laughing, telling her friends how she'd put her useless mother-in-law in her place. Ethan stood beside her, smiling weakly, showing not 1 ounce of remorse for what he'd just allowed. "Completely sure," I replied. 30 minutes, Carlos. No more." I hung up and walked to my car with steps no longer trembling but deliberate. For the first time in years, the mask I had worn to protect my family was about to fall away. For the first time, they would meet the real Aurora Hughes. And when that happened, when their perfect little lies collided with reality, they would finally understand the true meaning of regret. The parking lot was empty except for long shadows stretching under the streetlights. I slid into my old sedan and sat there, waiting. 30 minutes until everything changed. 30 minutes until they realized they had humiliated the one person who had quietly protected them more than they could ever imagine. As I stared at the dashboard, memories rose like a flood, unstoppable and dark. It had all begun 2.5 years ago, the day Ethan arrived at my apartment with that nervous little boy smile I knew so well. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special," he'd said. And there she was, Olivia. Perfect hair, designer clothes, a smile that never reached her eyes. From the very first moment, something in me bristled. The way she scanned my apartment, judging every inch with a thin veil of disdain, told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. "How cozy," she had murmured, glancing at my second-hand furniture and faded curtains. Her tone suggested anything but warmth. Ethan, blinded by what he thought was love, didn't hear the condescension dripping from her voice. That first dinner had been a silent disaster. Olivia barely touched the food I'd prepared with care, claiming she was watching her figure. When I asked about her family, she gave evasive answers, but not before probing into mine, her curiosity razor-sharp. "And how do you manage on a widow's pension, Aurora? It must be hard to get by on so little," she'd said, her voice painted with false concern. She thought she was studying me. She didn't realize I was studying her. In the months that followed, her patterns became clear. Every visit brought a new comment about how outdated everything was, how I deserved better in my golden years. But her eyes always lingered on the details that truly mattered. The prime location of my building, the value she thought I was too old or too weak to protect. The panoramic view from my balcony. The spacious rooms. The sunlight that poured into every corner. Olivia noticed everything. One afternoon, while Ethan was in the bathroom, I overheard her whispering in my kitchen. "Yes, Mom. His mother's apartment is in a super expensive area. If I can convince her to move to a smaller place, we could stay here until we find our own. She's so naive, she'll probably even thank us for helping her." Her voice was smooth, casual, deadly. Each word sliced through me like a blade, but when she returned to the living room, I smiled as if nothing had happened. From that moment on, every encounter became a silent war fought with polite smiles. She played the role of the caring daughter-in-law, always worried about my well-being. I played the weak, gullible widow who needed her advice. But inside, I was observing, learning, preparing. It was a game of chess, and we both thought we were winning. The manipulation began subtly. "Aurora," she would say gently, "I've seen some lovely apartments for people your age. Everything included, no maintenance, no worries." Then came the pressure. "You can't keep living alone like this. It's dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds you?" Every argument was designed to make me feel frail, dependent, and small. And then Ethan, my own son, began repeating her words, parroting them as if they were his own thoughts. "Mom, Olivia's right. Maybe it's time to consider moving somewhere easier to manage." Hearing him say that cut deeper than any insult. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after Robert's death, now saw me not as his mother, but as an obstacle to their comfort. When they announced their engagement, things escalated. Visits became more frequent, but colder. Olivia began bringing real estate brochures and magazines. "I'm just exploring options for you, Aurora. I want you to have the best quality of life," she said, laying them on my coffee table like contracts waiting for a signature. I nodded and smiled. But I had already begun my own investigation. One afternoon, when they left to run wedding errands, I called an old friend. "Amelia, I need a favor," I told her. "There's a couple interested in my apartment. I need you to find out everything about their finances." What she discovered left me cold. Olivia and Ethan were drowning in debt. The wedding they were planning, $50,000, was financed entirely by credit cards and personal loans. Their rent was months overdue. Their cars were leased with payments they couldn't afford. Their perfect life was nothing but a glossy illusion built on crumbling lies. Suddenly, it all made sense. The rush to marry, the constant talk about my big apartment, the guilt trips about my age and loneliness. It was never love. It was survival. My home, sitting in one of the city's most exclusive districts, was their golden ticket. The truth struck me like a blow to the heart. My son, the boy I taught to be honest and hardworking, had allowed greed to consume him. He had let an ambitious woman twist his mind until he saw his own mother not as a person, but as a resource to exploit. 3 days before the wedding, the mask finally came off. "Aura, you can't be so selfish," Olivia said, her tone sharp and unapologetic. "Ethan and I have sacrificed everything for this marriage. The least you can do is help us with housing." There was no fake concern left in her voice, only demand. That night, I made my decision. I called Carlos, my financial advisor, and the only man I had truly trusted since Robert's death. "Carlos," I said quietly, "I need you to prepare some documents. I may soon have to reveal things I've kept hidden for years." His tone changed instantly. "Mrs. Hughes," he said gravely, "are you certain this is the right time?" He knew. He had seen what I was capable of when pushed too far. "Once this information is out, you can't take it back," Carlos had warned me. "The consequences could be devastating for your family." But I had already crossed that line in my mind. The family I had spent my entire life protecting with silence had chosen betrayal over love. And now, sitting in my car in the dark parking lot outside the Royal Oaks Ballroom, waiting for Carlos to arrive with the documents that would end the charade, I knew there was no turning back. 25 more minutes. That was all it would take for Olivia, Ethan, and all those people who had looked at me with pity to finally see who Aurora Hughes really was. 25 more minutes until their carefully constructed world of lies and greed crumbled like a sandcastle under the tide. A cool night breeze rustled the trees, casting restless shadows beneath the streetlights. The air was thick with irony. How poetic that such a beautiful evening would mark the death of so many illusions. It had been 20 minutes since I made the call, but every passing second dragged like an eternity. From my car, I could see the ballroom's golden lights glowing through the windows, laughter and music spilling into the night. It felt surreal to know that in mere minutes, that celebration would transform into a nightmare. I closed my eyes, letting the pain of the past months flood my mind. I needed to remember exactly why I had come to this point of no return. The final humiliation had come 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Olivia had proudly called an important family meeting. She had arrived at my apartment with Ethan and her parents, a perfectly staged ambush. "Aurora, we want to talk to you about your future," her mother began, her tone sugary but her eyes sharp. She was a haughty woman, the kind who looked at people as if they were stains on her designer clothes. Her husband, broad and imposing, scanned my apartment as though appraising property. "At your age, living alone in such a large space is not only unnecessary but dangerous," he said. "What if you had a medical emergency and no one found out for days?" Their words were rehearsed, polished, dripping with false concern. Ethan said nothing, just sat there nodding like a well-trained puppet. Watching him, my son, sit beside a family that saw me as nothing more than a problem to be solved was like watching the sun I'd raised slowly die before my eyes. "Mom," he finally said, his voice unfamiliar, hollow. "They're right. Olivia and I have been talking. We think it would be better for everyone if you moved somewhere more appropriate for your age." "Appropriate for my age?" I repeated softly, feeling anger stir beneath my ribs. "And who decides what's appropriate for me?" "You?" Olivia's parents exchanged a knowing look, as if my reaction had confirmed their private theory about me. "Aurora," her father said patiently, "you must think about what's best for Ethan and Olivia." "What's best for them?" I murmured, suddenly seeing the truth unfold before me like a cruel revelation. "Let me guess, my apartment would be perfect for them to start their married life, wouldn't it?" The silence that followed was all the confirmation I needed. Every word, every argument, every sigh of concern had been part of a meticulously crafted plan to push me out of my home. That's when Olivia took over, her mask slipping into its familiar position of false empathy. "Aurora, it's not just about the apartment. It's about your well-being," she said, her voice dripping with practiced compassion. "We've done research and found a wonderful residence for people your age. It has 24-hour medical care, social events, gourmet meals. You could finally relax, make friends, enjoy life." Her smile was so fake it made my stomach turn. "What I'm going through?" I asked quietly, pretending not to understand. "And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Olivia?" She glanced at Ethan before answering. "Well, loneliness, financial stress, fear of getting older. It's normal, Aurora. You shouldn't be ashamed of needing help." The arrogance of this 28-year-old woman telling me what was normal at my age left me speechless for a moment. But then I saw something flicker in her eyes. Cold, calculating certainty. She truly believed she was entitled to my life, my home, my choices. To her, I was no longer a person with independence. I was an obstacle to be quietly removed. Then her father produced a folder, thick with papers. "We've run the numbers," he said confidently. "The residence costs around $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you could cover it comfortably for years. And," he added with a faint smile, "there would even be some left over to help Ethan and Olivia get started." And there it was, the truth laid bare. It had never been about my safety or happiness. It was about money. about turning my home into cash to fund their fantasy life. I took a long breath, feeling something inside me harden completely. And if I refuse? I asked quietly. I asked the question, even though I already knew the answer. Ethan's reply was calm, almost rehearsed. Aurora, he said, we hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures. The unspoken threat landed like a knife. If I refused to comply, they would find legal ways to declare me incompetent. They had done their homework. They had prepared the ground. If I didn't surrender my life voluntarily, they would simply take it by force. The son I had raised with so much love sat there, allowing strangers to threaten his own mother. That night after they left, after I refused them, I cried for the first time in years. Not out of sadness, but because something inside me had died. The last illusions I had about my family. Through tears, I called Carlos. I need you to investigate something urgently, I told him. My son, his fiancée. Everything, debts, income, liabilities. I want the truth. The truth was devastating. Ethan earned $45,000 a year as a sales manager, but was drowning in more than $80,000 in credit card debt. Olivia worked part-time as an image consultant, earning barely $4,000 a year but spending as if she had an executive salary. Together, they owed more than $120,000, not counting the wedding loans. Their $2,000 a month apartment was 3 months behind on rent. Their cars were financed at payments that ate up 60% of their combined income. Their main credit card was maxed out, and they were taking cash advances to pay other bills. They weren't building a life. They were in freefall. And my apartment was their only hope of salvation. But what broke me completely was what Carlos uncovered next. For 6 months, Ethan had been calling banks and insurance companies, inquiring about loans against his elderly mother's property. He had even been researching how to obtain power of attorney over senior citizens. My own son had been quietly planning my dispossession. And then, the final knife twist. According to a private investigator Carlos had hired, Olivia had been telling her friends she had sacrificed herself by marrying an older, less attractive man because his mother had valuable property and no heirs. To her, marrying Ethan wasn't about love. It was a calculated investment in my estate. For weeks I had considered revealing my true financial situation to them, hoping the shock might snap them back to reason. But after that report, I understood. This wasn't about desperation. It wasn't about money. It was about greed, pure, calculated greed that had hollowed out my son until he was unrecognizable. The days leading up to the wedding were torture. Every phone call from Ethan was another pressure campaign. Every visit from Olivia was a drip of poisonous comments about my stubbornness and selfishness. They treated me as if I were already a senile old woman whose opinions didn't matter. The night before the wedding, Ethan made his final attempt. Mom, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Olivia just wants what's best for all of us. Those words were my confirmation. The boy I had raised was gone. The man who was getting married was a stranger. And now, sitting in my car waiting for Carlos, I realized everything had led to this inevitable moment. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't cruelty. This was justice. This was about showing them the consequences of their actions, about teaching them that some lines should never have been crossed. 15 minutes. That's all that remained before everything changed forever. My hands trembled as I dialed Joseph's number, my neighbor, 70 years old, the quiet witness to months of tension. Joseph, it's Aurora, I said, my voice shaking. I need a very important favor. Go to my apartment. In the second drawer of my desk, there's a brown folder. Bring it to me. Yes, right now. It's urgent. Joseph had been like a brother to me since Robert passed away. I knew I could trust him. He wouldn't ask questions. As I waited, my mind flashed back to our conversation just a week earlier. Joseph had been on his balcony when Olivia arrived with a man carrying a briefcase. "Aurora," he had said gravely, "that girl brought someone measuring your apartment. A real estate appraiser. She didn't even tell you." He told me with obvious concern in his voice. When they saw me, they left in a hurry. I didn't like what was happening at all. Joseph had been the first to notice the small, deadly changes in Ethan over the last few months. "Your son doesn't even greet me like he used to," he had said. "He used to stay and talk. Now he rushes in and out like he's ashamed of something." His words confirmed what my heart already knew. I had lost my son long before the slap at the ballroom. The brown folder Joseph brought me contained papers no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property titles, decades-old investment records that Robert and I had hidden away. Documents that proved the poor widow on a pension was actually a woman whose decisions could change lives with the stroke of a pen. 10 minutes later, Joseph was back in the parking lot, handing me the folder. What's going on?" "You look shaken," he said. I told him briefly about the ballroom, and I watched his face harden with every word. "That woman is a viper," he muttered. I asked him to wait for Carlos and to tell him I was in the lot. "After tonight," I said, "many things will change. You've always been like family." He nodded, eyes wet. "You're family to me, too." Alone again, I opened the folder and read the life Robert and I had quietly built. The first paper was a bank statement showing an investment balance of $5,400,000. The next was a title for a downtown office building that brought in $50,000 a month in rent. Another deed proved ownership of a beach house purchased as an investment 10 years earlier. Robert had been a genius with money, starting from a tiny import business and building what we always called our silent empire. We had chosen a modest life on purpose, to protect our family and our privacy. Robert used to say, "Invisible wealth gives you power." I never imagined I'd have to use that power against my own son. Every page in that folder represented years of sacrifice and careful planning. The flower shop where I worked 3 days a week wasn't because I needed the money. It kept me connected to the neighborhood. The old car wasn't necessity. It was discretion. My apartment, the one Olivia coveted, was the least valuable asset in the portfolio, bought for memories, for the last years Robert and I spent together, for the room where he died in my arms after fighting cancer. Then there was the part that broke me and steeled me at once. For 3 years I had been quietly propping Ethan up. The credit card payments he credited to bonuses were transfers from my account. The reduced rent he bragged about came from me. The apartment, the car, even parts of the wedding had been funded, without his knowing, by his mother, who refused to let him drown. The bank records showed monthly transfers of $4,500. Money he thought came from raises or refunds had been my safety net, my way of protecting him from the ruin his choices deserved to bring. The irony cut so deep it made me laugh and cry at once. While Olivia humiliated me for being a financial burden, I was the only reason their lifestyle was even possible. While they plotted to strip me of my home, I had been quietly solving their problems for years. I closed the folder and looked toward the ballroom. The lights still glowed. Music still poured into the night. Guests still danced, blissfully unaware. In less than 5 minutes, Carlos would arrive with the final documents that would sever every secret thread I had used to save a son who had chosen to betray me. In less than 5 minutes, I would begin the process of cutting them loose from the safety net I had been forced to become. This is not revenge. This is justice, and the reckoning they've earned. I reminded myself, this is justice. Not revenge, justice. This was about teaching them that every action has a consequence, that greed carries a price, and that family is not a currency to be traded for comfort. For years, I had shielded Ethan from reality, and that very protection had poisoned him until he became someone I barely recognized. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness of the parking lot, momentarily blinding me. Carlos. Always punctual, always precise, and tonight, carrying the documents that would change everything. I stepped out of my car, each footfall pulling me further from the naive Aurora I once was, and closer to the woman I was finally ready to be. Mrs. Hughes, Carlos greeted, stepping out with his briefcase in hand. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we go in there, there's no undoing what's about to happen. I glanced at the ballroom, glowing in the distance, where my son and his new wife were likely still celebrating their victory over the useless old woman they thought they'd outsmarted. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said quietly. It's time they meet the real Aurora Hughes. Under the parking lot light, Carlos opened his folder, the papers crisp and final. Here's the immediate suspension order for all bank transfers made under Ethan Hughes's name, he explained, pointing at the first document. And this, the notice of lease cancellation for the apartment you secretly guaranteed. The landlord will receive it in the morning. My hands trembled as I took the documents, not from hesitation, but from the weight of what they meant. Each sheet was a thread I had woven to protect my son. And now I was cutting them one by one. And the ballroom payment? I asked, though I already knew. Cancelled, Carlos confirmed. The deposit will be withdrawn tonight. By tomorrow, they'll need to find another way to pay. A cold realization washed over me. For 3 years, I had been their invisible safety net, the unseen reason their life hadn't collapsed. The apartment, the car, even this extravagant wedding, all financed by me. And tonight, with one decision, I was ending it all. Carlos, I said, signing each paper with a calm I hadn't felt in years. This isn't revenge. It's a lesson. I protected them from the consequences of their own choices, and that protection destroyed who they were. He nodded solemnly. Mrs. Hughes, in my 30 years as a financial advisor, I've seen countless families torn apart by greed. What you're doing takes more courage than most people possess. His words steadied me. Together, we walked toward the ballroom entrance. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. I was about to lose my son's illusion of me, but regain my self-respect. When we entered, the music stopped instantly. 130 faces turned toward us, confusion rippling through the room. Some recognized Carlos, a man whose presence usually signaled serious business. Phones discreetly rose, ready to capture whatever this was. Juliet reacted first. What are you doing here, Aurora? She shouted from the center of the dance floor, her voice dripping with contempt. You already left once. Wasn't that enough drama for one night? Carlos spoke calmly, his tone slicing through the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the interruption, but I have urgent legal matters to address with Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson. Silence fell heavy. Even the air conditioner's hum sounded loud. Ethan stepped forward, pale and uncertain. Mom, what's going on? Who is this man? His voice quivered as he adjusted his tie, the same nervous tic he had as a boy. Ethan, I said, my voice steady, my heart steel. This is Carlos Jones, my financial and legal advisor. He's here to deliver documents I believe you'll find enlightening. Carlos unfolded the first paper. Mr. Ethan Hughes, he read, you are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your mother provided for your lease has been revoked. Your landlord will be informed tomorrow morning. You'll have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the premises. Ethan's color drained. Financial guarantee? He repeated softly, confusion giving way to dawning horror. He turned toward me, eyes wide. Mom, what is he talking about? I could see it in Ethan's eyes. That flicker of reluctant understanding. Deep down, he had always known. Some part of him had suspected that his easy comfort wasn't born of luck, but he'd chosen not to look too closely. Asking questions would have meant facing truths he wasn't ready to see. Carlos continued, his voice calm but merciless. The monthly transfers of $4,500 your mother has been making to your personal accounts have been permanently suspended. That includes your credit cards, car insurance, and all other expenses previously covered under her authorization. A sharp gasp echoed through the ballroom. It was Juliet. That's impossible, she cried, rushing toward us, the lace of her wedding gown dragging helplessly across the floor. Ethan doesn't have a rich mother. Look at her clothes, her car. She's just an old woman living on a miserable pension. Her voice cracked, hysteria dripping through every word. Guests began to murmur, intrigued and unsettled. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a spreading fire. Finally, Carlos said, lifting the last document from his folder, the guaranteed payment for this event has been canceled. The management now reserves the right to demand full payment before any guests are allowed to leave tonight. The words detonated like a bomb. The air thickened with shock. Some guests instinctively glanced toward the exits, others lifted their phones, ready to capture the unfolding scandal. Ethan staggered back, his complexion ashen. You, he whispered, barely able to form the words. You've been paying for everything? His voice broke on the final word. For a moment, I saw not the man before me, but the little boy I had once cradled, lost, frightened, seeking comfort. For 3 years, Ethan, I said softly, though every syllable carried the weight of truth. 3 years of paying your rent, your car, your wedding. 3 years believing I was helping you rebuild. 3 years hoping you'd remember who you were, the son I raised with love and dignity. Juliet began pacing in frantic circles, clutching her head. This isn't real. It can't be, she screamed, her voice slicing through the silence. You're a poor old woman. You sell flowers. You drive a 10-year-old car. You can't have money. Appearances can be deceiving, Juliet. I replied quietly, though my words carried like a blade through glass. My husband and I chose a simple life because we knew that visible wealth invites danger. We were right, only the danger didn't come from strangers. It came from within our own family. The music was gone. The only sound was the uneven breathing of the newlyweds and the low murmur of 100 witnesses realizing they were seeing something unforgettable. Phones rose higher now. No one wanted to miss a single word. Mom, Ethan said, his voice trembling, his pride stripped away. Please, there has to be a way to fix this. The wedding, the guests, everything. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I saw him clearly, not as my son, but as the man he had become. The only way to fix this, Ethan, I said, was not to break it in the first place. Silence. Heavy, absolute. 130 guests held their breath. Juliet froze, her eyes darting between Carlos, the papers, and me, desperate for an escape from the reality collapsing around her. Ethan just stared, his face etched with disbelief and dawning horror. "Mrs. Hughes," Carlos said, his professional tone echoing through the ballroom. "Shall I proceed with the full financial disclosure?" His words hung in the air like a blade suspended above them both. The crowd pressed closer, the tension electric. "Yes, please, Carlos," I said, with a calm I had never known before. "I think everyone here deserves to hear the full truth." Juliet let out a strangled scream of protest. But Carlos raised a steady hand, silencing Juliet's protest, and continued with the precision of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. "Over the last 36 months, he began, glancing down at the documents with professional detachment, Mrs. Aurora Hughes has transferred a total of $162,000 to cover the living expenses of her son, Ethan Hughes, and his fiancée. This includes $48,000 for rent, $44,000 for credit card payments, $18,000 for vehicle insurance, and $22,000 for miscellaneous personal expenses." A collective murmur rippled through the ballroom like a rising tide. Guests exchanged wide-eyed glances, some whispering, others pulling out their phones to double-check the math. At the head table, Juliet's mother slowly rose to her feet, her complexion turning ghostly pale. And furthermore, Carlos continued mercilessly, "Mrs. Hughes personally guaranteed the total cost of this celebration, the ballroom, the catering, the music, the flowers, and photography, in the amount of $53,000. Funds which, as I mentioned earlier, are no longer available to cover these expenses." The words hung heavy in the air. Juliet's face twisted in disbelief before collapsing into raw panic. "That's impossible. It's a lie," she shrieked, her voice breaking. "No one can have that kind of money and live like a pauper." She turned desperately to the guests, searching for sympathy, but found only curious faces, some stunned, others visibly entertained by her unraveling composure. "My dear Juliet," I said at last, my tone calm and almost tender, which only made her hysteria seem louder. "You've just learned a very expensive lesson about judging people by appearances. My husband Robert and I lived simply because we valued privacy above everything else. And tonight, I can finally say it was the wisest decision we ever made." Ethan took a hesitant step toward me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, please, there has to be some explanation. Some way to fix this. You can't destroy my life like this." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a fleeting second, a pang of maternal sorrow pierced through me. But it was quickly replaced by a sharper, older pain: betrayal. "Destroy your life?" I repeated, my voice trembling not with weakness, but fury. "Wasn't it your wife who slapped me in front of 130 people? Wasn't it you who stood by, silent, while she humiliated me? Wasn't it you who plotted to strip me of my own home?" The truth rang through the ballroom like church bells, clear, undeniable, echoing off every wall. A few guests nodded grimly, remembering the scene that had started it all. Others lowered their phones, the slap still captured in digital memory, proof of the cruelty that had led to this reckoning. But that was different. Ethan stammered weakly. "We didn't know, Mom. We thought you really needed help." His excuses fell flat, hanging in the air like smoke. The crowd's expressions shifted, pity turning to disdain. "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time that night. "You didn't know you were organizing an ambush to force me into selling my home? You didn't know you brought a real estate appraiser without my consent? You didn't know you had been looking for legal ways to declare me incompetent if I refused to cooperate. With each word, Ethan seemed to shrink, his shoulders folding inward, his gaze falling to the floor. The illusion of control was gone. Carlos cleared his throat gently, breaking the silence. From his folder, he pulled out a final document, crisp and deliberate. "Mr. Hughes," he said, his voice solemn, "I must also inform you that your mother has decided to amend her will. All assets previously designated for you to inherit," Carlos continued, his voice calm but firm, "have been redirected to charities dedicated to protecting seniors from family abuse." The words struck like a silent explosion. The entire ballroom froze. Juliet staggered backward as if she had been physically struck, her face draining of color. "You can't do that," she shrieked, her voice breaking apart. "We're your family. Ethan is your only son. You can't disinherit him over a stupid fight." "A stupid fight?" I repeated slowly, letting the words cut through the air like glass. "Is that what you call conspiring to strip an old woman of her home? Is that what you call slapping your husband's mother in front of 130 guests?" My tone had turned cold, glacial, and I saw several guests flinch as the weight of the moment settled over them. Juliet's father, who had remained silent until now, finally stepped forward, his face tight with panic. "Mrs. Hughes," he began nervously, "I think everyone's just overwhelmed by emotions. Perhaps we could discuss this privately when things have calmed down a bit." "There's nothing to discuss in private," I said firmly, my voice steady as stone. "Everything I had to say needed to be said here, in front of the same people who witnessed my humiliation. You chose to make this public, so my response will be public as well." The guests turned their heads from one speaker to another, as if watching a tense match, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Carlos closed his folder with a sharp snap that echoed through the hall. "Mrs. Hughes, all documents have been presented and explained. The legal effects take place immediately." He turned toward the couple, his professionalism tinged with quiet satisfaction. "I suggest you contact your own legal and financial advisors at once." Juliet's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her sobs raw and uncontrolled, echoing through the stunned silence. "Everything is ruined," she gasped between cries. "Everything we planned, everything we worked for, it's all destroyed." Her pristine wedding dress was now wrinkled and tear-stained, a ghost of the fairy tale she thought she had secured. "No," I said, stepping toward her for the first time since that slap hours earlier. "What's destroyed are the lies, the greed, the arrogance. What's destroyed is the illusion that you can exploit others and never pay the price." I stopped in front of her, forcing her to lift her tearful eyes to mine. "This," I said quietly, "is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Ethan moved to his wife's side, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Juliet will fix this. We'll find a way. There has to be something we can do." But his eyes betrayed the truth, the hopeless understanding that it was already too late. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. "There is a way to fix this, Ethan," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time in months, without anger, without grief, only clarity. "You can learn from this. You can grow from this. You can become the man I raised before greed consumed you." My voice softened, though my resolve did not waver. "But that growth will have to happen without my financial help, without my apartment, and without the illusion that I will always be there to save you." I turned toward the exit. The crowd instinctively parted, the murmur of whispers following my every step. As I passed through the ballroom doors, I felt the cold night air brush against my face, and for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Behind me, the music had stopped, the laughter was gone, and only silence remained. In that silence, I found peace. And without my inheritance, you'll have to earn your way, the hard way, like everyone else. The ballroom fell into a silence, so deep it was almost sacred. Everyone present understood they were witnessing the irreversible collapse of a family bond. Carlos and I turned toward the exit, leaving behind a hall filled with stunned faces and a newlywed couple whose perfect fairy tale had turned to ashes in less than 30 minutes. Then, a trembling voice broke through the quiet. "Wait, Aunt Aurora." It was Lucy, Ethan's younger sister. She ran toward me, her eyes glistening with tears. "I swear I didn't know what they were planning. Ethan never told me." Her voice cracked with guilt. Lucy, my sweet 29-year-old niece, had always been different, gentle, sincere, a schoolteacher with a heart too pure for schemes. "I know, Lucy," I said softly, cupping her cheek. "You've never treated people as tools to be used." Her tears fell harder as she nodded, her shoulders shaking. "But why?" she whispered. "Why did you hide all the money? Why keep such a secret from us?" I looked around at the silent crowd, realizing that, for once, the truth deserved to be heard. "Because your Uncle Robert and I learned long ago that money changes people. We've seen families torn apart by greed, children who see their parents as bank accounts. We chose a simple life to protect the relationships that truly mattered." Lucy slowly nodded, understanding dawning in her tear-filled eyes. "But Ethan wasn't like this before," she murmured. "He used to defend you from everything. What happened to him?" "What happened," I said, my voice quiet but heavy, "was Juliet, and the kind of love that disguises greed as devotion. I wanted to protect him from hardship, but in doing so, I deprived him of the lessons only life can teach: responsibility, gratitude, and consequence." My words lingered in the air like the final notes of a requiem. Carlos, who had stood respectfully nearby, stepped forward and whispered, "Mrs. Hughes, the ballroom manager is coming. He's been informed about the payment cancellation." Sure enough, a large man in a dark suit approached us, his expression tight with concern and authority. "Mrs. Hughes," he began, "I've just received a notice canceling the payment guarantee for this event. The contract is valid until tomorrow morning. Could you clarify what's going on?" "Yes, Mr. Martinez," I replied calmly, recalling his name from our earlier arrangements. "Due to circumstances revealed tonight, I've revoked my financial guarantee for this celebration." He followed my gaze toward Ethan and Juliet, two broken statues amid the wreckage of their own ambition. "I see," Martinez said, his tone professional, but edged with finality. "Then who will be responsible for the outstanding balance?" "The total is $53,000, including the venue, catering, music, flowers, and photography." The figure hung in the air like a sentence. Ethan stumbled forward, his voice shaking. "There must be some mistake. Mom, you can't just cancel it. We're family. We can fix this." Martinez's reply was firm but patient. "Sir, the payment guarantee was issued by Mrs. Hughes personally. She has every legal right to withdraw it at any time. Unless a new form of payment is provided immediately, I'll have to suspend the event." Juliet, still trembling, staggered toward him. Her once perfect gown was crumpled, her makeup streaked with tears, a living picture of ruin. "You can't do this!" Juliet screamed at Martinez, her voice echoing through the grand ballroom. "It's our wedding day. You can't ruin it over money." Her hysteria rippled through the guests, who began whispering nervously, glancing between her and the manager. "Ma'am," Martinez replied firmly, his patience thinning, "I'm not ruining anything. I'm enforcing the terms you agreed to. If payment isn't provided immediately, I'll have to suspend all services and ask everyone to leave." His words fell like a final judgment. The air grew heavy. Reality began to sink in, and the illusion of celebration shattered. Some guests gathered their bags, eager to escape the tension. Others lingered, unable to look away from the disaster unfolding like a slow-motion car crash. Then, Ethan stepped forward. Tears glistened in his eyes, something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Mom, please," he pleaded. "I know we were wrong. I know we hurt you. But there are photos, guests, memories. You can't destroy all this because of a fight." His voice broke on the last word, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the child he once was, before greed and pride had claimed him. "Ethan," I said softly but firmly, "I'm not destroying anything. You did this when you chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty, and humiliation over respect. I didn't take your happiness. You threw it away." Each word landed like a quiet blade, painful but necessary. Juliet's voice cracked as she turned to me, panic written across her tear-streaked face. "But what are we supposed to do now? How will we explain this? How can we pay for everything?" "You'll do what responsible adults do," I replied. "You'll work. You'll earn. You'll learn what it means to live within your means, to build something with your own effort instead of using others as stepping stones." My voice had grown stronger, not out of anger, but out of conviction. Years of silence, of swallowed humiliation, finally gave way to truth. Carlos stepped closer and whispered discreetly, "Mrs. Hughes, everything is finalized. The documents are in effect. There's nothing more we can do here." It was time to leave, to let them face what they had created, without me shielding them from the fallout. Before I could move, Lucy appeared once again and threw her arms around me. "Aunt Aurora," she whispered through tears, "you'll always have my love and my respect, no matter what happens with Ethan." Her words pierced through the armor around my heart. I hugged her back tightly. "And you'll always have mine, Lucy. Remember tonight not for its pain, but for its lesson. Character isn't measured by what you own, but by how you treat the people who love you." Her tears soaked my shoulder as she nodded, truly understanding. Martinez returned, this time more urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I need a resolution immediately. I can't keep my staff here without payment." I turned one last time to face Ethan and Juliet, the son I had raised, and the woman who had destroyed his soul. "You have my phone number," I said evenly. "When you're ready to talk about respect, about values, about what it truly means to rebuild a life, call me. But first, fix this mess yourselves." Without waiting for a response, I took Carlos's arm and walked toward the exit. Behind us, chaos swelled, voices rising, guests leaving, reality crashing down like a storm. 3 days later, my apartment had become an island of peace I hadn't felt in years. Every morning, Joseph arrived with coffee and warm pastries, checking on me, calling it the morning after Aurora reclaimed her dignity. His visits were balm to my soul, reminding me that love, when true, needs no inheritance. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Ethan had called 37 times, his messages shifting from fury to pleading. Juliet had sent 14 desperate texts. Her parents had come to my door twice, demanding I fix the chaos. But I stayed calm and silent. That morning, Carlos arrived with a solemn face and a folder in his hands. "Mrs. Hughes," he said quietly as we sipped tea on the balcony, "I have the latest reports. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday morning. The ballroom has already initiated legal proceedings to recover the $53,000 owed," Carlos informed me the next morning. "Their credit cards have been canceled for non-payment." I took a slow sip of tea, staring out at the city below. "And where are they living now?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. "With Juliet's parents," Carlos replied. "In a small 2-bedroom apartment, already housing 3 people. My sources described the situation as tense." His tone suggested that tense was a charitable understatement. That afternoon, as I tended to the plants on my balcony, I noticed a familiar car pull up in front of my building. Lucy stepped out first, her face pale but determined. Beside her was Amelia, an old friend from my real estate days. And to my surprise, Joseph climbed out of the back seat, looking grim. "Aura," Lucy called up from the sidewalk. "We need to talk now. There are things you have to know." Moments later, they were in my living room. The air was heavy with urgency. Lucy clutched a thick folder that looked disturbingly similar to the one Carlos had brought to the ballroom. "Aunt Aurora," she began, her voice trembling, "I've been digging into some things since the wedding. You need to know before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I asked, pouring tea for them, forcing my hands to stay steady. Amelia cleared her throat. "Aurora, I've spent the last 3 days investigating Ethan and Juliet's finances. What I found is worse than we imagined." She opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents that made my stomach twist. They'd been planning this for over a year. Juliet consulted with lawyers who specialize in mental competency cases for seniors. They were preparing a legal strategy to have you declared incompetent and seize control of your assets. I felt the blood drain from my face. Joseph leaned forward, his expression dark. "There's more," he said quietly. "The night after you left the ballroom, I overheard Juliet on the phone. She said, 'The old woman ruined everything, but Plan B is still in motion.'" "Plan B?" I repeated, feeling a cold wave of dread wash over me. Lucy reached out and gripped my hand tightly. "Aunt Aurora, they've been spreading rumors, telling everyone you've gone senile, that the scene at the wedding was proof you've lost touch with reality. They're building a case to convince a judge you can't manage your own affairs." The magnitude of their betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Public humiliation hadn't been enough. Scheming to take my home hadn't been enough. Now they were trying to erase me, to weaponize my pain and turn it into evidence. Amelia's voice trembled as she added, "Juliet's also been visiting your neighbors, spreading stories about your erratic behavior. She's urging them to report anything that seems off. It's a full-blown defamation campaign." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cruelty was methodical, surgical. They weren't just after my property. They were after my reputation, my sanity, my identity. Just then, the door opened and Carlos stepped in, his usual calm replaced by something far more somber. "Mrs. Hughes," he said gravely, "I see your friends have already shared part of the story. Unfortunately, I have news that confirms everything." He pulled a fresh set of documents from his briefcase. "Ethan filed a preliminary petition yesterday. He's asking the court to evaluate your mental competency, citing what he calls irrational behavior and erratic financial decisions." My heart pounded. "On what basis?" I demanded. Carlos sighed, scanning the papers. "Sworn statements from several guests at the wedding. They describe your behavior as an unprovoked outburst against an innocent couple and your financial actions as vengeful and unstable. Lucy squeezed my hand until it hurt. They convince people to sign those papers, Aunt Aurora. Most of them don't even understand what really happened. They just saw an old woman confronting newlyweds. The room went quiet, heavy with the realization of how deep this betrayal ran. Then, Joseph's face brightened suddenly. "But there's hope," he said, pulling out his phone with a faint smile. "More people are on your side than they think." He held out the screen toward me. A video playing on social media, its view count already in the hundreds of thousands. "Joseph, what is this?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Remember how several guests were recording that night? Well, those videos have gone viral. And people aren't seeing a senile old woman attacking an innocent couple." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "They're seeing a mother, finally standing up to the children who betrayed her. They weren't seeing a senile old woman attacking an innocent couple. They were seeing a dignified woman exposing years of abuse and manipulation." Amelia leaned closer to Joseph's phone, astonished. "Aurora, the comments are overwhelmingly in your favor," she said. "People admire your strength, your composure, your courage to draw the line. Some are even sharing their own stories of family abuse. You've become a symbol of resistance against the exploitation of elders." Carlos nodded, his tone measured but optimistic. "This public reaction is invaluable. It's difficult to argue that someone is mentally incompetent when thousands are praising her logic and bravery." His faint smile hinted that the upcoming legal fight might not be as one-sided as I had feared. "But there's something else," I said, standing. The decision had been growing in me for days. If Ethan and Juliet want a public battle, they'll get one. And this time, they'll learn who they're dealing with. I walked to my desk and retrieved a folder I had prepared myself. For 3 days, I've been working with lawyers who specialize in elder abuse. I've documented everything: their intimidation, their threats, their scheme to seize my assets, even the slap Juliet gave me. I showed them the photos, the swelling on my cheek, the medical report. "If they want war," I said, my voice steady, "they'll have it, but on my terms, with truth as my weapon." Then I smiled, a smile of liberation. "And I've decided to do something I should have done long ago. I'm going to tell my story publicly. I'll show the world what happens when greed hides behind the mask of family love." The room seemed to shift, charged with new energy, the strength of people united by truth and justice. 6 months later, I sat under the bright studio lights of Stories of a Lifetime, moments before my interview began. My story had captured national attention after the wedding videos surpassed 2 million views. Across the country, I had become a symbol of resilience and dignity. The host, Catherine Diaz, adjusted her papers and smiled warmly. "Mrs. Hughes, your courage has inspired thousands. We've received hundreds of letters from people who faced the same nightmare." Much had changed since that disastrous wedding night. The case Ethan and Juliet filed against me had collapsed spectacularly when Carlos presented proof of their conspiracy. They were fined for legal misconduct and ordered to pay my $45,000 in legal fees. Their bankruptcy came quickly. Ethan lost his job after the scandal, and Juliet's image consulting business never recovered. Now they lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, buried under debt. "We're on air in 5 minutes," the director called. I took a deep breath, glancing at the cameras that would soon broadcast my story to millions. Carlos sat beside me, ready to explain the legal side. In the audience were Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, my steadfast companions through months of turmoil. The hardest part had been Ethan's silence. After losing the case, he never called, never wrote, never apologized. It was as if hating me was easier than facing his shame. Juliet, however, had reached out, at first with threats, then with pleas. Her last message, just 2 weeks ago, read, "Aurora, we know we made mistakes, but we're family. Ethan is sick with stress, and I'm pregnant. Please, don't let your grandchild grow up in poverty." The words pierced me like a blade. I was going to be a grandmother, yet my grandchild would be raised in a home poisoned by resentment toward me. I had learned the hardest lesson of my life. You can't save people who don't want to be saved. Trying to do so only feeds their cruelty and keeps you trapped in their chaos. Mrs. Hughes, we're live in 30 seconds, Catherine reminded me. I inhaled deeply, thinking of the hundreds of letters I'd received, messages from people who saw my story and found the courage to tell their own. Seniors whose children had seized their finances. Parents blackmailed by ungrateful adult children. Grandparents threatened with losing contact with their grandchildren unless they kept giving money. 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on. Catherine began smoothly, her tone warm yet grave. Good evening, and welcome to Stories of a Lifetime. I'm Catherine Diaz, and tonight, we share the story of Aurora Hughes, a 68-year-old woman whose experience has shaken the nation and brought family abuse against elders into the public spotlight. She turned toward me. Mrs. Hughes, 6 months after that night at your son's wedding, how does it feel knowing your story has inspired so many? Her question, gentle but piercing, gave me the space to speak honestly. I feel grateful, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Grateful that something as painful as losing my son could still serve a purpose, to help others see that they're not alone. For months, I doubted myself. I wondered if I was the one who had gone too far. But now I know, what happened to me happens to far too many. Catherine nodded. Tell us about the years leading up to that night. When did you first sense that something was wrong? It was the question I had been waiting for, the one that allowed me to uncover how abuse often hides behind affection. It started with small things, I said softly. Little comments about my age, hints that maybe I could manage on my own. Then came subtle pressure to sign papers, to make decisions that benefited them, not me. Family abuse doesn't begin with shouting or violence. It begins with quiet doubts planted in your mind, until you start questioning your own reality. Carlos, seated beside me, leaned toward the microphone. What Mrs. Hughes describes is a textbook pattern of elder abuse. It often begins with emotional manipulation, disguised as care, before turning into financial or legal coercion. It's one of the hardest forms of abuse to recognize, especially when it comes from family. Catherine glanced at her notes. And the breaking point. When did you decide to expose the truth? The slap, I replied simply. When Juliet struck me in front of 130 people because I refused to hand over my apartment keys. That was the moment I knew it wasn't about family anymore. It was about survival. The studio was silent. I could feel the weight of every viewer watching. For 45 minutes, we walked through every chapter of my story. The years of quiet sacrifice, the secret financial support, the betrayal, and the fight to reclaim my life. Each answer wasn't just my testimony. It was a warning to others. A lesson in recognizing the signs before it's too late. Finally, Catherine asked the question I had both feared and hoped for. Mrs. Hughes, if your son is watching tonight, what would you say to him? I turned toward the camera, my heart pounding. Ethan, I began, if you're listening, I want you to know I still love you. I will always love you because you are my son. But loving someone does not mean accepting their cruelty. It doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity for their comfort. It doesn't mean becoming a victim of their greed. Tears welled in my eyes as I continued. The doors to my heart will always be open, but only if you can walk through them as the man I raised you to be. Only if you can look me in the eye and take full responsibility for what you've done. Only if you can understand that family is built on love and respect, not on control or manipulation. Then, I looked into the camera, addressing every person whose pain mirrored my own. And to all those watching who recognize themselves in my story, please know this: you have the right to peace, to safety, to respect. It's never too late to take back your voice. Because dignity, I said, my voice firm, is the one inheritance no one should ever take from you. As the red light faded, the studio fell into silence, a silence that spoke louder than applause. For the first time in years, I felt free. You have the right to be treated with dignity, no matter your age. You have the right to decide what happens with your money, your home, your life. You have the right to draw boundaries with those who hurt you, even if they share your blood. And when those boundaries are crossed, you have the right to seek help and to be believed. As the cameras went dark, the studio erupted in applause. Technicians, producers, even stagehands wiped away tears. Catherine embraced me tightly, her voice trembling. Aurora, that was one of the most powerful interviews I've ever done. You've changed lives tonight. Carlos nodded beside her, pride softening his usually composed expression. We hadn't just won a legal battle. We had started a movement. That night, driving home with Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The city lights flickered across the windshield like quiet blessings. I had spoken my truth. I had defended my dignity. I had turned my pain into purpose. From the back seat, Lucy reached forward and took my hand. Aurora, I'm so proud of you, she said softly. You turned the worst chapter of your life into something that will protect thousands of people. Her words echoed inside me long after we reached my building. The apartment that Juliet had once coveted now finally felt like home, not because I had won a court case, but because I had reclaimed myself. That night, before bed, I stood by the window, watching the quiet city breathe. I understood something I had spent a lifetime avoiding. Sometimes, the only way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. You are never too old to demand respect. And sometimes, love means walking away so that you can love yourself again. My story had ended, but my life was just beginning. 2 years have passed since that night that divided my life into before and after. This morning, as I sit on the same balcony where I once watered my plants and hid my tears, I smile at how much has changed. The woman who once accepted humiliation in the name of love has become someone new, someone unafraid to set a price on her dignity. The phone rings. It's Carmen, the coordinator of the Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors, the organization I founded using part of my reclaimed inheritance. Aurora, we have 23 new cases this week, she says, her voice balancing sorrow and determination. Same story every time. Adult children pressuring their parents for property or money. I listen quietly, my heart heavy but resolute. Each story feels like a reflection of my past, a reminder of why I do this. Yesterday, I reviewed the file of a 72-year-old woman whose daughter convinced her to sell her home for her own good, only to waste the money on a failed business and a luxury vacation. The day before, It was a 69-year-old man whose twins told him, "If you don't lend us $50,000, you'll never see your grandchildren again." The irony isn't lost on me. My deepest wound has become my greatest purpose. Since its founding, the foundation has helped over 400 seniors reclaim control of their lives, their finances, and their self-worth. We offer legal assistance, counseling, and something far more precious, hope. The kind of hope I once thought was lost forever. Joseph, now 72, serves as the foundation's vice president. He jokes that retirement turned him into a detective for dysfunctional families. "Aurora," he told me last week, laughing over coffee, "I never imagined my golden years would involve hunting down manipulative children, but it's the best adventure I've ever had." Lucy, too, found her purpose here. After leaving a short, painful marriage, she moved into the apartment next door. As the foundation's educational director, she designs programs that teach respect, empathy, and emotional boundaries. "Aunt Aurora," she often says, "you showed me that family isn't always blood. It's the people who choose to stand beside you with love and without conditions." The success of my public story has led to unexpected blessings. The book I wrote, When Love Hurts, An Elderly Woman Fights Back, became a national bestseller, selling over 200,000 copies. Every cent of the royalties goes to the foundation. The letters I receive from readers remind me that my story has echoed in thousands of homes where silence once reigned. Carlos still manages the foundation's finances, ever the professional, ever loyal. Amelia travels across the country giving lectures on financial independence for older adults. And Joseph, well, he still brings me coffee and pastries every morning, just as he did the week after the wedding. Sometimes, as the sun rises over the city, I whisper a silent prayer, not of bitterness, but of gratitude, for the pain that taught me strength, for the betrayal that revealed my purpose, and for the love, imperfect, complicated, enduring, that made me the woman I am today. Because in the end, dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you reclaim one brave decision at a time. Carlos is now not only my trusted advisor, but also the foundation's chief accountant. His experience from handling the legal battle with Ethan has become an invaluable asset in helping others reclaim what was wrongfully taken from them. "Mrs. Hughes," he told me during our monthly meeting, "we've recovered more than $3 million in assets and savings stolen by abusive relatives." His words filled me with pride, not for the money, but for the justice those numbers represented. People often ask the same question in every interview, every intimate conversation. Do you miss Ethan? The truth is complicated. I miss the boy he once was, kind, bright, full of promise. I miss the illusion of the family I believed we had. But I do not miss the manipulation, the emotional blackmail, or the constant erosion of respect that defined our final years together. Ethan has reached out 3 times in the past 2 years. The first was 6 months after my television interview, when his coworkers began to treat him differently. The second was after Oliver, my grandson, was born. The third was 3 months ago, when Juliet left him, taking their baby and half of what little they owned. Each call had the same purpose, a request for money, never remorse. He still sees his misfortunes as the world's fault, never his own choices. Our last conversation lasted barely 5 minutes. "Mom, your pride matters more to you than your grandson," he said bitterly. I answered calmly, "Ethan, my dignity is just as important as my grandson, and I hope one day he learns that lesson better than you did." Then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on my son. The silence that followed was strangely freeing. The only subject that can still bring me to tears is Oliver. He's 14 months old now, and he doesn't know me. When Juliet left, she took every family photograph, including the few I had of him. Still, I've set up a trust fund for his education, managed by Carlos, to be released when he turns 18, no matter what our relationship looks like by then. Maybe. Amelia often tells me during our Sunday dinners, when Oliver grows up, he'll seek his own answers. Maybe he'll come find you. Amelia has become my closest confidant. She understands the pain of setting boundaries with toxic relatives. She lived through it herself a decade ago. What amazes me most about these 2 years is how much my health has changed. During those last years with Ethan and Juliet, I suffered from chronic insomnia, headaches, and anxiety so constant that I forgot what peace felt like. Now, my doctor says my test results reflect a woman 10 years younger. Aurora, Dr. Hernandez told me at my last checkup, the body heals when we remove the poison from our lives. Your blood pressure is perfect. You sleep deeply. Even your posture has changed. He's right. I walk taller now. My hands are steady when I make decisions. The flower shop where I once worked closed last year, but I've found new joy in the community garden I helped build in our building. These days, I spend my mornings in the community garden teaching other older residents about medicinal plants and organic growing. Working with soil connects me to the earth and to people who value wisdom, not dismiss it as something outdated. My week now has rhythm and purpose. 3 days at the Foundation's office, 2 days visiting seniors who need emotional support, and weekends dedicated to writing my second book. This one will focus on practical strategies to detect and prevent financial abuse within families, drawn from the real cases we've helped resolve. The apartment that once symbolized greed has become a sanctuary of peace and creativity. I turned Ethan's old room into an office where I welcome those seeking guidance. The walls are covered with thank you letters, photos of families who rebuilt their relationships, and certificates from universities where I've spoken about dignity and resilience. One of the most fulfilling parts of my new life is mentoring older women who are rediscovering their strength. 6 months ago, Margaret, 74, came to the foundation after her son sold her car without permission to pay off gambling debts. For 3 months, we worked together to recover her losses. Last week, she sent me a photo, standing beside her new car, smiling. In her letter she wrote, "Aurora, you taught me that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. You taught me that self-love isn't selfishness, it's essential. You taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Her words reminded me that every tear I once shed had meaning. Looking back, I know my story doesn't have the fairy tale ending. No grand family reunion, no perfect forgiveness. But it has something far more valuable: authenticity, reclaimed dignity, and a purpose that reaches beyond my own pain. If I could speak to the Aurora who walked into that wedding ballroom 2 years ago, I'd tell her, be brave. What's coming will hurt deeply. But on the other side of that pain, you'll find the most honest version of yourself. Peace is waiting, the kind that comes from never letting anyone treat you as disposable again. Tonight, as I finish writing these reflections, I feel hopeful about tomorrow. I have a meeting with senators to discuss new legislation to protect seniors from family abuse. Next week, we'll open our foundation's 3rd regional center. Next month, filming begins for a national documentary series on this very issue. At 70, my life feels fuller and more meaningful than it ever did at 68. I've learned that the end of a toxic relationship is not a tragedy, it's liberation. That family isn't only who you're born to, it's also who chooses to love and respect you. and that it's never, ever too late to begin a new chapter of your own story. When people ask if I regret what I did that night, my answer is simple. Did you like my story? And where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to send a super thanks. It helps me keep sharing true stories of strength and rebirth. Thank you for your kindness, your support, and your time. On the screen, you'll find 2 more life stories I highly recommend. There's so much more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next life story. With love and respect.